The European Union is going to court. Their client is Lithuania and their target is China. But what's the lawsuit about? Unfair trade practices against Lithuania. We told you about this yesterday. China is blocking Lithuanian goods at their border. Last month, exports dropped around 91%. What's worse, China is threatening European companies to cut their ties with Lithuania. Weeks later, the EU has finally woken up. They have suddenly remembered that Lithuania is a member of their bloc. So how are they responding? By filing a case at the World Trade Organization.
These measures are a threat to the integrity of the EU single market. They affect the intra-EU trade and EU supply chains, and they have a negative effect on EU industry. This is why we are stepping forward to defend EU's rights. Today we are bringing the case to the WTO.
Sounds heroic, doesn't it? The brave EU standing up for tiny Lithuania. But approaching the WTO was the bare minimum. You could even call it a publicity stunt because Brussels is not 100% committed to this lawsuit. Their preferred option is a compromise. Listen to this.
Certainly there can be diplomatic solution, and also from the EU side we are facilitating and trying to resolve this dispute amicably. What we are responding here is the coercive trade practices applied by China. So those are two parallel tracks.
What diplomatic solution is he talking about? What we told you yesterday, renaming Taiwan's office in Lithuania. In other words, doing exactly what China wants. Approaching the World Trade Organization is just a face saver to deflect criticism, to show the world they're doing something. But let me tell you something about the WTO. It's the perfect example of justice delayed is justice denied. Investigations go on for months. There are arguments, counter-arguments, delays, protocols. Most cases are resolved after years. In fact, the WTO accepts this. Here's what their own website says. If a case runs its full course to a first ruling, it should not normally take more than about a year, 15 months if the case is appealed. We are talking about two of the richest groups in the world, the European Union and China. They have unlimited resources, unlimited legal expertise. If China wants, they can drag this dispute for years. And what happens in the meantime? More losses for Lithuania, more threats for European companies. A much better option is retaliatory action. If China is blocking Lithuanian goods, why can't Europe do the same to China? Maybe impose higher customs or more regulation. Because that would require all European nations to join hands, and for all the talk of European solidarity, that's not happening. And China has consistently benefited from this setup. Let me tell you about another case at the World Trade Organization. This one was filed in the year 2012, 10 years ago. The United States had imposed higher tariffs on certain Chinese goods like magnets, steel and tires. Washington said that China was dumping goods in the US market. What does that mean? You see, most Chinese companies are run by the state, the bigger ones. They get subsidies and benefits, things that private companies do not get. So obviously their goods are going to be cheaper. And to level this market, President Barack Obama imposed tariffs on them. Technically, anti-dumping tariffs are legal. The WTO does permit them. But in this case, they sided with China. After 10 years of deliberations, China has won the case at the World Trade Organization, so they can now impose tariffs worth $645 million on American imports. Needless to say, Washington is not happy. Here's what their trade office said, and I'm quoting again. Today's decision reinforces the need to reform WTO rules and dispute settlement, which have been used to shield China's non-market economic practices and undermine fair, market-oriented competition. Simply put, China has rigged the game. You see, the WTO was created to serve the market economy. Their rules do not cover China's typical companies, the ones owned and controlled by the state. So WTO decides on a case-by-case basis, and this system benefits China. Since the year 2007, China has been party to more than a quarter of all WTO cases, 25%. What helps them is their designation. In the World Trade Organization, China is classified as a developing nation. And this comes with a lot of benefits. more time to fulfill WTO commitments, more assistance in dispute resolution, and more technical help. Now, I get that China has a huge population, but even so, their economy is too big to be called developing. They are waging trade wars with America and Australia. They're threatening European multinationals. Doesn't sound like a developing nation, does it? The fact is, the WTO needs an urgent overhaul. Until then, these complaints against China are unlikely to work. Beijing only understands the language of force, tariffs for tariffs, blockade for blockade. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.